Well, here we are, finally. We've been trying to do this testimony for a couple weeks now, and it seems like everything from technology to not feeling good, just kind of getting in the way. So I'm really happy we get to do this today. It's Sister Brittany Dees. My wife and I think that she is incredible. She sings and just really ministers to the church body and to the church, and what a great addition she's been, to the Faith Apostolic Church of Troy. So here we are in Survivors Talk. We're going to just talk, have a conversation about your testimony and about just some great things that God's done in your life. So if we just want to start with prayer, and then after that, we'll kind of get into it, okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Lord. I love you, and I thank you so much for today. I think you have given us time to be together. I just ask, Lord, that you would just have your way, God, that you would just use this time, that we would have just to minister to anybody and everybody, that whoever's supposed to listen and view this video, this testimony, God, I just ask that it would find its way to that person, to their ears, to their life, Lord. Bless our time together here. Lord, I pray that you just give us a little bit more time than 40 minutes. So, we're going to do great things today. We love you. We appreciate you. And we do everything in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, it's my first time doing this, so thank you for being a guinea pig. But we want to kind of get into it. And, you sent me your testimony that you wrote down, and I read it to my wife and had me in tears. I didn't know a lot of those things about you. And it helped me just to kind of have this newfound love for you. We know each other, but not well, and knowing somebody's testimony, knowing what they've been through and their struggles, you connect to that. And so I appreciate you wanting to do this. I appreciate you, being vulnerable and sending over some things. So just wanted to get into it. And one of the things that really kind of stuck out to me was that around the age of 9, you had just some good things, some bad things, that were going on in your life that kind of led to some other things. So at 9, what was going on? What kind of happened? Where were you at? And, that kind of stuff.
So at age 9, I was basically kind of in the middle of, my parents were separating. They weren't divorced yet, but I came home one day, and my mom wanted to talk to me in the kitchen after I got home from school, and she had said, Dad and I are getting divorced. And for me, at age 9, you would think, you don't really know anything about what that means. But I had a friend who had actually had their parents were divorced too. So we were a little close at the time, and I saw what it was like with her and everything, and I knew what that was going to mean, that one of us was either going to live with the other parent, or I knew it was a messy process. And I remember just kind of not knowing what to think. I ran out of the house and completely ran down the street. And my dad actually was the one that came after me, and just kind of fell right on a rock right down the street and just started sobbing. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't talking to the Lord at that point. And I just was, there was nothing I could do. All I was doing was crying. My dad came after me and had said, we're going to get through this. And that was the first time I had ever saw my dad cry.
Wow.
And I was very emotional. I remember in that moment that I started getting very angry with my mom. As a big daddy's girl, because I'm the only girl. I have 2 brothers that are both younger than me, because I am the oldest. And I remember, because of my dad being the one coming after me, it kind of built something up where it was just like my dad. I was very, very close with my dad growing up. Very close for the 13 years that I had him. Very close. I talked to him all the time about very, very personal stuff and everything. He was the person that I talked to. So at that point, I just kind of in that moment had turned all of my anger and everything in that moment toward my mom. She was the one that told me about it. She was the one that kind of initiated all of it. And that instantly made me strongly dislike my mom at that point. And I kind of had to keep going with that, because when my parents did end up getting divorced, I lived with my mom. My dad lived out of his truck, and we would see him on the weekend, and at one point we would see him at church. And usually at church I would stay with him until we had to leave. But it was always my dad. I was always with him. Mm-hmm. And then there got to be points where, you know, I had such a rough relationship with my mom because we would constantly be bickering back and forth about, you know, my attitude, because I was a big brat at that age. And she knew it. I was a big brat. And I was sometimes purposely a brat. I mean, I had a very strong anger towards my mom, and I made it my point to let her know I was very angry with her. At that point, we kind of started trying to go to family counseling, because it got to be a really, really hard part where I was playing my parents against each other. And I would get mad at something my mom would say, and then I'd go back to my dad and tell him how much I disliked it. And of course, if you're going through a divorce, your parents don't like each other at that point. They love each other, but maybe not so much right then and there.
Yeah.
So of course my dad would hear everything I had to say and then go back and tell my mom exactly how he felt. And it just created problems. It created a lot of problems that I was the cause of. Yeah. And I did it on purpose. And it was hard. It was hard for my brothers as well, because, you know, they saw it. And my one brother, Zachary, was only 2 years younger than myself, so he knew exactly what was going on. Caleb, on the other hand, didn't really understand too much because he was so young. Yeah. But, you know, we kind of, that was the norm at 9, was, and kind of a few years after that was, I'm not gonna listen to my mom. I'm only gonna listen to what my dad says and do what I want to do. Yeah. And I had been born and raised in church my whole life. My mom is fourth generation apostolic. My dad was first.
Didn't know that.
Yep. And my dad was first generation. So my dad did not grow up in the church his whole life. His whole life was a testimony as well, you know, with him being an alcoholic and everything. Wow. Most of his teen years and everything. And I remember hearing about, you know, some things that he had went through about, you know, even struggling with alcoholism. And one night being at the church and completely healed his esophagus, because his esophagus was so eroded from all the alcohol that he drank. And he would talk about, you know, how he would drink hard liquor because he was from the South. So that's what they did. Yeah. But, you know, I kind of grew up with both sides. I grew up with someone who was not raised in church and then someone who was. So I had both sides of that growing up, at least to 13 and everything. So it was just mostly that at that time, it was just a matter of getting through my younger preteen years. I do remember at 10 was actually when I got baptized and filled with the Holy Ghost. My friends were all like 5 and 6 and younger.
Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good.
I had to turn the thing on. Our battery's about to die. So sorry about that. I'm listening. Okay. I heard everything.
But yeah, at 10, I was kind of, you know, not understanding why I didn't have the Holy Ghost, why I wasn't baptized yet. People had asked me about baptism and everything, and I just was like, you know, I don't know. I'm not feeling it. Yeah. And I remember being at church camp through ALGC, which is where I'm originally from, through there. And we would have camp every year. And I remember being at the very front at altar call and everything. And my myself and my friend who actually had her parents who were divorced, we actually got it at the same time.
Oh.
And I remember the whole experience. It was just completely awesome, feeling the Holy Ghost and everything. And just that sense of, you know, that sense of difference.
Yeah.
It was kind of hard to kind of explain it, especially at 10. But I knew immediately when I got home, I knew I wanted to be baptized too.
Yeah.
So I talked with my mom, and I told her, you know, I said, I feel like I want to be baptized. My papa, who I consider my grandpa, was the pastor at the time. And it was kind of a funny story with my baptism, because I remember growing up seeing my papa baptize many people, and he would always touch them on the chest and pray for them on the chest. And I was just like, I don't want that. I told my mom, I said, I don't want Papa to baptize me, because I'm afraid he's going to do that. And that just is that I was like, no.
Yeah.
So I told my mom, I was very close with my Uncle Stephen growing up, which is my Papa's son.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know, I want Uncle Stephen to baptize me and everything. And of course he automatically was just like, yes. But he also was wondering why too, because they were wondering why. And it was just this whole funny story, because it was just like, of all things you think about, why would that bother you? And I don't know. It's just one of those things. So every time I think about my baptism, it just comes up as a great day, but also a funny time.
It's funny how when you're younger and as a child, you think of just the craziest things, you know. So, so let me ask you a question. So going through this divorce, I went through the same thing. Like I was, I think 7 or 8, so I was real young too, and I was the oldest and had 2 sisters. So I know, I mean, it's hard during the time, and you know, you do everything you can to try to bring them together, but then you feel like, oh, that's not going to work. So now I got to kind of play both sides. So I get that. I understand that.
Yeah.
So even though that you had this thing going on in your life, you were still thinking about baptism, still getting Holy Ghost. Did you not blame God? Did you not say, God, like, you know, I'm not going to do this because you allow my parents to, you know, get divorced? I mean, were you having those thoughts during that time?
Not necessarily. I mean, both of my parents encouraged me in the Lord, because even though it was a rough time, both of my parents, that was still the number one thing to my parents, was making sure I had a relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
That was, if anything they could instill in me, that was what they encouraged me to have, was a relationship with the Lord.
Wow.
It wasn't at that point, it wasn't like, you know, one-on-one conversations with the Lord or anything. It was just a matter of following my parents, being obedient, that they wanted me to have a relationship with the Lord. So I made it my point to want to go to church, want to be involved in kids choir at the time, which was what I was involved with, was kids choir. And it just was that, like, that for me. I mean, my parents drove me to church and everything, but at that point it was more of a, I wanted to go to church because that was my safe haven.
Yeah.
It was where I knew I got to see all of my church friends. I knew I got to see all of my family. And it was just, that was what I would call my happy place.
Yeah.
I knew everything was completely fine. There was no arguing. There was nothing going on when I was at church.
Yeah.
Well, that's really good.
Yeah.
I know for me growing up, just going to my dad's on the weekends. I lived with my mom, and there'd be fights, and you'd get upset. You see your sisters, and I wanted to protect my sisters. It's such a traumatic thing that nowadays seems so, accepted, but then, like, I don't think people really realize how hard it is on kids, you know? And I wasn't raised in church. I didn't have parents like that at the time that wanted to instill that in me, you know? But, you know, when you said that you had another friend at camp that her parents were getting divorced, I think it's amazing that at such a young age, God still brought you somebody that, you know, was your friend that was going through something similar, and you guys bonded over something so traumatic in your life. But instead of sitting there and, you know, making the worst of it, you guys said, I need the Holy Ghost. I need to get baptized. I need to know more about God. And I think that's amazing that you were choosing to do that, because you could have easily have said, God, I don't care what you're going to tell me right now. I'm done with this, because, I should have, grew up in this, my parents, this and that. And, you easily could have blamed God, but it was your parents' choice, to do these kinds of things. So, I really give it up to you for that. But also, how awesome was it for Lord to bring somebody, with you that kind of, help you along. And are you still friends with that girl today, or?
I am. She actually lives right down right 2 doors down.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good. So you got baptized. Did you get the Holy Ghost? Did it happen at your home church, or how did that happen?
Camp.
Oh, camp. You got the Holy Ghost at camp?
Yep, I got the Holy Ghost at camp. Got baptized at my home church.
Did your uncle baptize you?
He did.
Oh, good. Yeah, I know him. I know him actually. Seen him like a few weeks ago. He's a great guy. So, so I don't know everything about your testimony, but there's some things that I think would be so great to bring out that I know is probably hard to talk about. But I don't really know kind of like the order in which things went for you. So after you got the Holy Ghost, after you got baptized, what was next? I mean, what happened in your life?
So that all happened between 9, 10, and 11. When I was 12, I started getting kind of worse with my mom. Having lots of conversations with her and everything, and it kind of started escalating even more. We were having a rough time with getting time to see my dad, and it just kind of kept getting worse between all of us together. My dad started getting sick, and he was having problems with blood clots, and actually he was living with my cousin at the time, which was his nephew, that actually came up from Louisiana and lived with him, and my dad was actually able to help save my cousin and get him into church and everything.
Wow.
And
That's
he's
amazing.
Doing phenomenal with his kids and his wife still at my home church. But he was living with my cousin, and he kept having issues with blood clots. They didn't know why. He was in the hospital a couple times, and I remember one specific time him going into the hospital. We talked to him on the phone. We went and visited one time before that. I had just turned 13 in September, and this was kind of all between October and December that he was kind of in and out of the hospital and everything with all of this blood clot stuff. And in December, he went into the hospital for blood clots again, and they were going to do a procedure on him to put a stent in, which I'm still a little unsure what it does. I know it catches blood clots. My brother would know more than I would, because he works in that kind of stuff. But he had one put in, and he was going to be coming home a few days later. The Saturday on December 16th, 2006, we were getting ready, me and my brothers, to go to the movies with my grandma, my mom's mom. And I remember getting a call from my papa and my grandma, which are also the pastors at Grace and everything. Mm-hmm. So I remember getting a call from my papa saying, Brittany, you have to get your brothers ready. Your dad's expected for the worst. Like, kind of at that point was like, what? Because I'm like, he's supposed to be coming home today. Yeah. I didn't understand. I kind of didn't understand, but having a mom as a nurse, I knew expected for the worst meant he was going to die. And I remember when they got to the house, my papa had me sit in the front seat with him, and my grandma sat in between my brothers in the back seat. And I just remember the whole drive to Royal Oak, Wilmot, which is where I work now. Just kind of having that feeling of something is wrong. And I wasn't really praying or anything at this point. At this point, I was just like, my mind was going in so many different directions. I just kind of didn't know what to process. I was just thinking the whole time, you know, am I going to see him? Am I going to be able to, you know, what am I going to do when I get there?
Yeah.
So we had gotten to the hospital, and I remember going up to the I think it was the 8th floor at that point. I got up to the 8th floor, and we turned the corner, and I had family that were sitting right there in the little waiting area. It looks so much different now, but at that point there was a waiting area right there, and I remember seeing them, and I thought, I was like, I didn't understand why they were there. And my cousin, my dad's nephew, came through the double doors and took me and my brothers and my grandparents to the back. And my mom was sitting in a conference room and was completely bloodshot. I knew in that moment that she was going to tell me something I didn't want to hear.
Yeah.
And she had me sit with her, which I thought was very interesting because we had, you know, all this stuff going on with each other.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I knew kind of why she wanted me to sit with her. So she had me sit right with her. And then I think each one of my grandmas took one of my brothers. So I think my grandma Michael had Caleb, my grandma Ida had Zachary. And I remember sitting right there, and my mom was kind of, I could tell in her face she didn't want to have to say what she had to say.
Yeah.
And she said, Brittany, daddy passed away.
Wow.
And instantly my heart broke.
Yeah.
I could not believe what had happened. I remember it to this day, and I just started just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing, not having any thing in my mind about God or anything like that. I just remember, you know, I was so numb. I actually couldn't remember anything about what was going on.
Yeah.
And we finally had calmed down. Me and my brothers had finally calmed down. And my mom said, do you want to go see him? And I said, yeah. So we came out of the conference room that we were in, and like kitty corner to where we were was my dad's room. He was literally right there. My cousin's nephew was my dad's nurse, who was actually the person that had found my dad.
Wow.
He had the stent that was in him came dislodged and clogged his heart and killed him instantly.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
They found him on the floor. And I didn't know that at that time. Actually, I didn't know that until a couple years later. But I remember going into the room and seeing my dad lying there on the bed, just completely motionless. It was very, very hard to see him like that.
I can imagine.
I actually had to leave the room because I just couldn't stand there and look at him like that. I ended up going out of the room, and my family remained in the room, and I actually just sat right in front of the door, watching my family just kind of still pouring in through the waiting room. And at that point, it was just like, when I think about it now, it was so great to see all of my family pouring in like the way that they were.
Yeah.
Of course, when it was going on, I didn't care anything about it.
Yeah.
But seeing all the family that actually were there, but not just family, lots and lots of family friends. And I remember going down the hallway and walking with my cousin. I was very, very close with my cousin. My cousin Jesse was like my older brother, my dad's nephew. And he had said, you know, do you want to go for a walk? I said, yeah, I want to go for a walk. And we just talked about, you know, what was going on. I didn't really have a lot to say, but I knew I wanted to see my dad, but I wanted to see my dad by myself. My cousin said, okay. So we went to go back in the room. Everybody was already out of the room. And there was a nurse that was standing right there. And my cousin told her she wants to stay in the room just by herself. And God bless the nurse, because I couldn't do what she did that day. She did not want me staying in the room by myself. She was afraid that I would do something.
Yeah.
And she was absolutely right.
Yeah.
At that point, I wanted to literally jump out the window.
Yeah.
I remember sitting there with my dad. My cousin got the nurse to at least agree to have me in there, but have my cousin stand at the door. And I just remember staring at my dad. And then at that point, that's when that question hit my mind. Why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, why have you done this? Why have you done this? Why did you take him? He was supposed to come home today. You know, why? That was the only thing I could ask, was why. And then I kept thinking, okay, you raise people from the dead. I know you can raise my dad from the dead.
Right.
I know that you can revive him. There's nothing that has gone on with him where you couldn't revive him from right now. So I kept asking the Lord, and I'm like, I don't know what to do, but I need you to do something, because my heart's breaking.
Right.
And I remember laying my head on my dad's chest, like I would do for very, very many years. That was my favorite thing to do, even up to 13 years old, was lay my head on my dad's chest. And just remembering just that point where it was just like, I don't want to live.
Yeah.
I didn't want to live. I wanted to go with him. I knew where he was going, and I wanted to go with him. And after that, something kind of clicked in me. We were getting ready to go home, and my grandparents were walking me, my mom, and my brothers out. And something in me just clicked right then and there. And my dislike for my mother turned into absolute hatred.
Wow.
I hated my mother.
You blamed her for?
I blamed her.
Okay.
I blamed her.
What was it? Like, what was it? Why did you blame her? What was it?
You know, it was like one of those things where it was just like, I didn't have an excuse to blame her.
Okay.
I just blamed her because of how badly I was hurting, that I wanted to blame the only person that I knew I was already having problems with.
Yeah.
Was her. And I also had in my mind, you know, if we were together, we would have seen our dad more, and maybe we could have got him help sooner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all of it ended up being accidental. The whole experience with my dad's death was accidental, and there was nothing anybody could do about it.
Yeah.
But at that point, I just remember that, like, that flip of being sorrowful and then walking out. I started arguing with my mother, and I hated her from that very moment.
Wow.
I remember my grandparents actually telling me to calm down, and my mom actually telling me to knock it off, because I was so mad.
Yeah.
After that, I don't have a lot of memories after that. It's just like one of those things where it's all just kind of blank. But that was that whole process. I didn't even go back to school, I think, for 2 weeks after that. My brothers and I were just kind of at home, and then really after that, I have no memory of what happened after that.
So you obviously you're still living with your mom after the fact, and so, you know, after your dad's like funeral, and kind of come to grips with the passing of your dad, did what was your mindset like? So you were probably still arguing with your mom, still having like a great deal of animosity between the two of you, and I'm sure that it was probably so hard and awkward for both of you guys. I couldn't imagine being in that situation, but what did you do that you were just like, this is done, it's happened, there's nothing I can change, I can't do anything about this, I can't bring my dad back? Did you dive more deeper into God? Did you walk away from him? I mean, was there certain things that you just started changing, good or bad, in your life?
Well, during that time frame, I was starting youth praise and worship, and I was also on the praise and worship team on the adult choir. So I was doing both of those. That was something that my parents instilled in me at a very young age, because both of my parents were very musical. My dad was a singer. My mom was a praise and worship leader. My mom was a flute player and everything. And that was something that we always, as a family, had something in common with, was singing and praise and worship. And also my grandparents. My grandparents were singers and everything too. My papa was actually one of the biggest people that got me into that love for music and everything, because he would always, anytime we were always at Papa and Grandma's house, they were always singing. We were always getting involved, and that's how I kind of really loved music.
Wow.
And then learning about praise and worship, not really too much at that age about what it actually meant.
Yeah.
But knowing that was one way that I could worship the Lord was through praise and worship.
Yeah.
Still, I was doing that at 13, actually, because at that point I was old enough to do it. So I actually been doing that even up until my dad's passing. And I actually, it kind of, after my dad passed, it was more of routine.
Yeah.
And I knew that I was still involved, so I was going to keep doing it because I was involved. And at that point, I actually wasn't too much having a relationship with the Lord. I was, but like not a lot.
Yeah.
I remember just in my mind, just going through the motions. I knew to go to church. I knew to sing. I knew to pray. What about at that point, it was just like, okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At that point,
There's really
it was
no emotion to it.
no emotion. There wasn't. I actually at that point was starting to see a psychiatrist.
Okay.
Because I actually was having suicidal thoughts. I wanted to kill myself. I actually at one point was about to. I got up on the roof of my house, was ready to jump.
Wow.
And I remember the Lord specifically telling me to stop. I heard it loud and clear. I got back down and I was like, I didn't think anything of it. I actually at that point was just like, I didn't feel the bad side and anything of it. It was just one of those things where I listened to what the Lord told me and just got down, but didn't think anything of it at that point. But at that point, when I was a teenager, I got very good at putting on a face.
Yeah.
Very good at it.
Yeah.
Everybody knew my situation. Everybody knew what was going on. But I knew that if I put a face on, nobody would ask me questions. No one would ask me, how are you doing? Because I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. I didn't want to have a conversation with anybody. I loved all of my friends. I loved all of my church family, but I didn't want to talk. So
Fear of being vulnerable, or what made you so scared?
I think it was a lot with being vulnerable, because I knew that I'm like my mother in that way. I'm a tough cookie.
Yeah.
Now it's like I can talk about my emotions and it's easier for me. But at that time, I did not want to talk about my emotions because I knew it would make me cry. And at that point, I was done with crying. I had cried so much in that time frame that I was just done. I didn't want any emotions to come out. And that's when I had to start seeing a psychiatrist, because I wasn't talking to anybody. I was still arguing with my mom, still having issues with her. It was even more of when I was 9 and before my dad's passing. was way more.
Whose
I was getting-
idea was it to go see the psychiatrist? And secondly, did it help you?
So it was my mom's idea. She looked for Christian counselors at first, and I started seeing a Christian counselor, and it helped a little, but there were some things that couldn't help it.
Yeah.
When I started seeing a psychiatrist, she started putting me on medication. I was taking a few things for my attention deficit disorder.
Mhm.
And and I was completely depressed as you could get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just remember being so numb, but it was even more of a numbing feeling because then I was on medication. So it was just like nothing was coming through, nothing was coming out. I literally felt just like a shell. Things just kind of got harder and harder when I was seeing my psychiatrist. I didn't know what to kind of get into. I started getting into things that I shouldn't have been getting into, started hanging out with friends that were not great friends.
Like out of church friends?
Out of church friends.
Yeah. Okay, so you had some other influences, and then you're in a time that you're completely open and just susceptible to anything and everything, you know. And I get it, 'cause I've been there, you know, like when you have something happen in your life, or whether you choose to do something and you still have this church thing going on, you still have this ties to it, you still want to do those things, but then you have these other influences that maybe you've never experienced before. So, I would imagine that you probably were being pulled every which way, and, didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do, didn't know where to go. And I would imagine you just walking around numb, and the fact that you heard the Lord's voice say stop, and you obeyed, that tells me that deep down inside of you, you really have this love for God, that you really do want to have that relationship with him, that in the midst of something that you wanted to end your life with, he said, no, stop, and you did it, and you listened, So that speaks to the training that you had, to everything that you had learned and listened and obeyed to up until that point. So
Yeah.
if you listen to that, when it came to these other things that you knew you shouldn't have been doing, why didn't you just listen? Why did you just get into it?
I kind of still to this day ask myself why. And I do know one of the things that I got into it when I was 13, a little after my dad passed, was pornography.
Okay.
That was a really messy thing that I dealt with for a very long time, up until I was about 18.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I remember sitting in the dark, was just staring at the TV screen that was completely fuzzy. And then I remember looking at the screen, and I saw some stuff that I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
And I thought, what is this?
Yeah.
And then it was kind of that thing where it was just like, really, I shouldn't have been able to see it because of it being so fuzzy.
Yeah.
But then it started kind of getting clearer and clearer and clearer. But it was still fuzzy, but it was starting to get to the point where I could make out what was going on.
Yeah.
And then I saw a what do you call it? A site.
Oh, okay.
So at that point, I had my own computer. I looked up the site and then realized what it was.
Yeah.
I had never experienced that before, was never talked to about it, didn't know anything about it. So at that point, I was just curious about what I was seeing.
Yeah.
And then curiosity became a thing where I started watching it every day. Just, it became a lifestyle.
Yeah.
I started watching it every day. I would literally come home from school and be like, I want to watch it.
Yeah.
And at that
Well,
point,
it's like any other addiction.
it was.
Yeah.
I got to the point where I would literally come home and want to watch it.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, more of along the lines of it brought out a feeling.
Yeah.
And at that point, being numb with no feelings,
Oh,
it brought out a
that
feeling.
sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And I was, at that point, it was the only feeling I could feel at that point.
Yeah.
I wasn't feeling, the presence of the Lord in that moment of my life. That was, I think, the moment in my life where I kind of felt like the Lord walked away from me.
Yeah.
I would end up watching it, and there would be times where, my mom would catch a glimpse of what I was doing, and I would get in trouble.
Yeah.
But I would lie. I got very good at lying during that point of my life.
Yeah.
Because I had to lie about what I was watching, because I knew if I told the truth, she'd take it away from me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And you had to protect what you were at the time not realizing, but falling in love with, because that's what it was for me, addiction. Like I was protecting with lies, and eventually I hurt my wife and hurt people close to me, and they would take it personal, but I wasn't trying to hurt them, but I was trying to protect what I was falling in love with. And while I'm falling in love with this, falling out of love with the Lord. And so what I viewed as him walking away from me was quite the opposite. I was walking away from him and, blaming him for allowing me to get into this situation. And, maybe I can kind of see there's such a relation between you and I in that sense that you had something that you could blame him with, but here you are making the choice to do that, So, I mean, looking back on that time, could you say that that's accurate, that you were the one walking away and he actually was not the one?
Yeah. I mean, and there was something in me, it was a very faint at that time, where it was just like, I truly did love the Lord.
Yeah.
And it hurt because I knew it was hurting him.
Yeah.
But I had such that want and desire for that thing.
Yeah.
That it kind of was more than my love for the Lord at that point in my life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I just remember, it also was creating something in me that I couldn't get past what was going on between me and my mom as well, with the whole, bickering back and forth and arguing and getting, into situations just with her and I. It just was like, it was hard. I remember at 15 being finally, my mom, I love my mom. She just, God bless my mom for praying for me through every single bit of it and still loving me at that point. Because I remember at 15, my mom and I were at our wits' end with each other. I remember being called into the office with my papa, who was my pastor, and a few ministers, and them talking to me about emancipation. And I didn't know what that meant until my uncle was explaining it to me. And something in me just kind of clicked, because I'm like, I didn't know that emancipation meant I would literally be on my own.
Yeah.
And I loved my mom, even though I was being awful towards my mom. I loved my mom.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that had to do with the Lord, because I still love my mom. There was things that I knew I could not go beyond.
Yeah.
I knew there was things that I could do to make my mom hurt as much as I was hurting, but I knew there was buttons I could not push beyond that point.
Yeah.
My mom was was always telling me, about, how it says in the Bible, obey your parents so that your life will be prolonged.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true. It's so true.
Yeah.
Even though I wasn't obeying my mom at that point, the thing she strived more than anything for me was to make sure I had a relationship with the Lord. At that point as a teenager, it wasn't as strong, but it was there.
Yeah.
Because I remember going through that time of my life of watching all of that junk and stuff in my life, that I could feel a sense of like a tug. I could feel a tug in my heart.
Yeah.
And I could feel that, you know, the Lord was trying to pull me out of it, and I was trying to hold on to it so tight that I didn't want to let go.
Yeah.
And I just remember being at the altar one time and feeling that tug so strong that I was just like, why? What is it doing for me? Why am I watching it?
Yeah.
Why can't I let go of it? And I just remember just in having that moment at the altar, I loved the Lord so much that I had to let it go. I had to tell the Lord, you know, I love you. And it kind of, at that point, it was kind of turning into a condemnation instead of a conviction. And I think that's why the Lord was tugging so hard, because he knew that if I did go into that sense of condemnation, I probably wouldn't have came back out of it.
Yeah.
I probably would have walked away from church.
Yeah.
And
You
walked
were
away from
going through all of that, you know, depression, the pornography, all of the suicidal thoughts. You know, did going to church or people checking on you, just maybe your mom, you know, encouraging your walk with God, did any of that get on your nerves as a teenager? Or
it actually, it didn't really get on my nerves. If anything, it helped me get through every day. I remember countless times doing things I shouldn't have been doing with either, you know, the pornography stuff or, you know, other things. That I remember going downstairs many times to my mom's room, and I could hear my mom praying in her room for me. I could hear my mom speaking in tongues for me.
Yeah.
And that was so special to me, because I felt horrible for how I was treating her, but I couldn't get myself to actually let her in.
yeah.
But I remember talking to the Lord and saying, you know, I don't know how to let go. I don't know how to let you in and also let all of this go. It's so strong in my heart that I just don't know how to let go.
Yeah.
And I remember getting to a point at 19 going on to 20 that I just finally, I have to give it to you. I love you more than it. I love you more than the pornography. I love you more than the depression.
Yeah.
And it came to a point where I actually experienced joy a little bit more, not fully.
Yeah.
I actually didn't experience full joy until I actually came to FACT.
Wow.
And I've only been at FACT for 5 years. It actually got to a point where when Pastor Walker had started teaching about forgiveness. And at that point, I was having a better relationship with my mom, but not as good as it could have been. And then Pastor Walker talking about forgiveness and about true forgiveness, because I've always heard forgiveness my entire life.
Yeah.
But to hear him break down true forgiveness and be able to go back to my notes and everything about, you know, forgiveness is not just for that person, it's also for yourself.
Right.
And the levels of forgiveness too, on how you have to release that person that you're trying to forgive to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, I remember it being one of the prayer meetings that we had. In that moment, I was thinking about the things in my life that I needed to forgive. My mom being one of them. And I remember kind of praying, and the Lord was starting to speak to me and said, "You have to forgive me."
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
I know, isn't that crazy?
I know.
didn't think about it.
For people who don't understand that, being that God is blameless, he's sinless, like, you know, he doesn't do wrong, because I had to learn the same thing. And Sister Walker taught me this, and it was when she said it to me, I'm like, are you crazy? Because, like, you know, but it put it in perspective, because it really, like, allowed me to see that, like, well, here I am blaming God, and here I am saying, well, you caused it all. But then when it came down to forgiveness, it's like, well, forgive him for what? So it's like, it really just put two things together and helped me to understand, like you said, about forgiveness. And it's hard, because how do you approach forgiveness when it comes to the Lord? Like, what do you say? How do you approach somebody that didn't do anything wrong, that you're bringing everything that you did wrong, all of your anger, all of your emotion, you know, sadness, everything that you had, and and
Mhm.
poor choices, and you need to say, I forgive you for all of this. Like, how do you go about that? Because that's, to me, before that, it didn't make sense. But going through everything that I did and learning
Mhm.
about that over time, looking back, it makes total sense to me. So not only did you have to learn about forgiveness, you got to learn, forgive God, yourself, and then obviously you're going to ask your mom and whoever else close to you. So when it came to the Lord, did you have a defining moment? Was there something that you finally just like, you
I
gave
had
to God?
I had a beautiful defining moment.
Okay.
I, in that point, learned how much the Lord had loved me,
Yeah.
because that was something I struggled with. I kept thinking the devil was so good at getting me to think about things in my life, and still
Yeah.
tries to do the same thing today,
Right.
because I can't undo what I've done. But by asking for the Lord's forgiveness, it's under the blood, and that's, I don't have to worry about it. Once it's under the blood, it's gone. But he can still try to bring up my past.
Yes.
And
That's why he says
that
he's the accuser of the brethren. Yeah.
And at that moment, I had a really hard time learning about the Lord's love towards me. It actually, I remember a moment when we were having prayer meeting, and it was a defining moment for me, not just with the Lord, but also with pastor, because I grew up with having family as my pastor, which was great. I am who I am today because of my family being that leadership in my life.
Yeah.
But then that transition from grace to fact, I loved Pastor Walker and Sister Walker, but that moment actually stood out to me more. I remember praying at towards the corner, on one of the sides of the church, and I just remember just weeping. I couldn't understand everything that I was praying over. I remember speaking in tongues and everything, but I remember one moment with Pastor. He had came over to me, and he had got down on his knees and started praying with me until I was finished. And that struck me so much, because I've never had a relationship with a pastor as I have with Pastor Walker. But for him to do that with me showed me how much my pastor cares about me, but it also showed me about the relationship between me and the Lord.
Right.
Because the Lord loved me so much through every single bit of it, that he never left me in any of it. That's something that he also made very clear to me, that he never left me through any of it. He saw every tear I cried. He saw every move that I made. But he also got me to a point in my life where he had revealed it to me that there are things that I have to go through in my life, so that way I can be able to tell my testimony to someone else.
Yeah. Right.
We don't want to go through it at that time when we are in the midst of it. But to see back all the things that I went through, and to know, having conversations with young ladies like myself, and be able to tell them, my testimony and everything. I look back and I think about it, and I'm like, Lord, I'm so grateful that I have a testimony.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have to go through it, but I wouldn't ask for anything different.
Right.
Something that I actually asked myself too was, well, would I want my dad back? My dad had such a strong relationship with the Lord that I knew he would want me to have that same relationship that he had.
Right.
And I knew that he would want me to be able to say, I love my dad, but I love my God more.
Sure.
And that's kind of been, my transition into my 20s, with now being 26, is learning how much the Lord loves me. My favorite song, Sister Beth knows it, I'm sure Danielle knows it, that it's my favorite song. My favorite song is Reckless Love by Corey Asbury. Because the words of that song are about how he leaves the 99 for the one.
Yeah.
And through this past Easter weekend, with having to watch the Jesus by Sight and Sound, it gave a little bit more of a hit home with me,
Yeah.
because I was just like, that to me is so true,
Yeah.
because I was the one and now I'm part of the 99.
Yeah.
So now being able to be part of the 99 and be able to see the ones, it's so awesome to be able to be that part, to rejoice with that one,
Yeah.
because I was one time at
Right.
that point the
Right.
one.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. You know, I've seen you grow. I have a special love towards your brother Caleb as well. The Lord just gave me a huge burden for him when he first came here. And, you know, we kind of developed a little friendship at that point. And by way of that, you know, it kind of made me pay attention to what you're doing, what, you know, kind of seeing things, you know, and I watched you come in, you know, with your mom and your brother, and then it went over to now it's you. And, you know, I can see that you have this walk with the Lord. I can see through, you know, the ministry of singing, you know, how you've progressed. I can see the transition that you've made from, you know, almost lost really, to now here you are wanting to help the lost, which is exactly what you just said. So for somebody watching this video that maybe, you know, has gone through some of the same things, I think that one of the questions they would have is, how is the relationship with your mom today? And, you know, you don't have to get into great detail. I'm not asking for great details, but is the relationship with your mom getting better? Is it better? Do you guys talk? Like, do you guys bring your dad up? I mean, does you guys have like intimate conversations?
I have a great, phenomenal relationship with my mom.
Okay.
It's a God thing, to be totally honest. When I started going through forgiveness aspect of what Pastor was talking about, the Lord allowed me to love my mom the way he loves my mom.
Yeah.
And in turn, it got to a point where I started loving my mom from myself. But it's not just myself. Having the Holy Ghost and everything, it allows me to have that love that the Lord has, but also amplify it with the love that I have as well.
Sure.
So having that relationship with my mom that I have now it's phenomenal. I talk with my mom every day. I go to my mom for advice. My mom, you know, I talk to my mom about the word and about the Lord, about things that the Lord's been revealing to me still to this day, about things that I've had spoken over my life, promises that the Lord has spoken to me, which is phenomenal, because when I think about all the things that I had to go through, it's just like, wow, Lord, that promise is for me.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just like, it makes you just go back to how great God is, that he would take someone like me and give me these promises that I've prayed about for years, that I never thought that the Lord would actually give me these kind of promises that he's given me. One of them being with music and being a praise and worship leader, just with the whole, but when Brother AJ Holloway was here,
Yeah.
I was just dumbfounded about what the Lord had spoke to me through him. I was just like, wow. I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, my mom and I have a great relationship. I still, you know, I bring a lot of vulnerability to my mom now than I ever did when I was a teenager.
That's good.
But the greatest thing that I know that I can always go to my mom is advice about God, advice about the word. And even now, advice about, you know, life, because my mom has a story too. And my mom actually has gotten to the point where she's actually had the opportunity to actually talk to me about some of those things in life that she went to that I never knew of when I was a teenager. But now I've been able to learn as a young adult, the things that she's actually been through too. And it just blows my mind, some things that she's been through too. But it also has opened an avenue of being able to talk to my family about personal things.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love, I shout out to my mom. I love you, Mom. something she doesn't know that I know was she actually had went back to my dad, and they forgave each other about everything before any of that happened.
Wow.
Didn't know any of that when I was a teenager, and finally had learned that in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And that gave me an even better relationship with my mom, knowing that she had done that.
I
But there
think
was
that if you would have known that at the time, I don't think it would have had as much of an impact as it does now, because you just wouldn't have understood that, you know.
Yeah.
And I get that too, because you know my mom and dad, they've had their moments, you know, to where they had to go through all that and forgiveness and things like that. So, but at the time, you're just so full of anger. You're so full of like confusion and you know everything else that you and then everything you invite in. So it's like you wouldn't even have been able to understand that. So you know it's great that you brought that out, because it's very important that people, when they see your story, that they see that the forgiveness and things that come after is not just a one-time thing, but it's a progression. And the more that you get to learn the insights of things, the better it's helping you to understand and forgiveness. And you know I'm sure that like it helped you look at your mom in such a different way. And you know it's great to hear that, because we need to hear that. We need to be encouraged, you know, with things like that. So you know I appreciate you sharing that. I mean it's a great thing. So yeah. Wow.
It was a phenomenal thing for me, just being able to experience that. I know there's some things, you know, we're mother and daughter, so of course we're going to have our disagreements. So it's not perfect.
Yeah.
It never will be.
Yeah.
But as far as having a great relationship with each other, yeah, we have a great relationship with each other. And it's awesome because, you know, she's helped me in so many ways that I could never have done for myself. One of the biggest things that she helped me was being able to move out on my own. And I was not ready for it at all. It was the scariest moment of my life.
Yeah.
And I actually was a little bit upset with having to move out at that point.
Yeah.
But when I look back at it too, my best moments with the Lord have been in the past 4 years that I've been living on my own, because I've had a close relationship with the Lord where it's just me and him.
Yeah.
And my mom, I believe my mom knew that too, when she was helping me make this transition with my brother and everything, that I had to be on my own and be able to have that moment to where it's just me and the Lord.
Yeah.
My mom now lives in Mississippi.
Oh, she does? I didn't know that.
She does.
Yeah. Wow.
Now it's really me and the Lord.
Yeah. Wow. That's funny.
But it's awesome, and I owe everything to the Lord, but the biggest person that I owe it all to is her. If she didn't pray for me, if she didn't get on her knees travailing over me, I never would have made it. I never would have made it without a mother that is constantly praying for me, even in the midst of all of the junk that I was creating with her.
Yeah.
And something that actually just popped into my mind too. My mom actually and I had a deep conversation one time where my mom actually had asked me to forgive her. There was nothing I needed to forgive.
Yeah.
But we had that moment where it was just like we came to a point in our relationship where it just all cards were on the table.
Yeah.
And to be able to hear that coming from my mom and knowing that a lot of it was me, but for her saying that to me was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I never would have expected that to come out of my mouth, nor did I want it, because that's something that, you know, parents don't have to do. For me, what I've had to learn is parents do things because they love you.
Yeah.
And at that point in a kid's mind, we don't understand the things that our parents have to do for us.
Yeah.
But having her be able to kind of let the reins loose just enough to be able to understand having that relationship with the Lord was most important in my life. allowed me to be able to have that relationship with the Lord, because the thing for me, I had to have a relationship with the Lord during this whole thing. It wasn't as strong, and there was a lot of times where I didn't include him, but I knew better.
Yeah.
And I knew that the Lord was listening. Even though I wasn't giving him those keys to my heart, letting him sit on the throne of my heart.
Yes.
I still knew that I loved the Lord through all of it. I knew that I could never walk away from him. I could never imagine walking away from him. Even to this day, it just surprises me about it all, because I'm just like, Lord, all of these things that, you and I have walked through together, I cannot believe that I never did walk away.
Yeah.
And then he started revealing things to me about, the times that I was speaking out loud. I was speaking to him. As a kid, you kind of think you're talking to yourself.
Yeah.
And you're not. You're talking to the Lord, whether you like it or not. You're talking to the Lord.
Yeah.
And that was something I never understood as a teen, and started realizing when I got older that, I wasn't talking to myself. I was talking to the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's what kept me going, was knowing that I was still having a conversation with the Lord, but I wasn't fully aware of what kind of relationship that was.
Yeah.
But that's something so great about the Lord, is because we experience him in different levels. And at that point, it was a level of just walking day by day, getting through each day. Yes, I stumbled. Yes, I failed, but still getting right back up. Still, doing my norm, which at that point, going to church, making sure I was at church, all that was my norm. I knew that I had to go. I knew that still was my safe haven. But knowing that I still had, to do it, I still did it for myself. When I look back, I still did it for myself. And I did it because of because of my parents, watching them and growing up, what they instilled in me, I never would have, comprehended that until I got into my 20s, because having them be able to be that I'm trying to think of the word and it's just not coming out.
I get what you're saying, because we have two teenage kids and two younger ones, and we talk often about, I hope we do enough. I hope that we teach them enough. I hope that the things that they not only hear from us, but that they see from us, good and bad. My kids, they know what I went through, and what we all went through, and I want them to have the same exact outcome that you're saying, that I look back, I'm drawing from this. I'm still getting, they're my point of reference from, when I didn't know who God was or what God could do for me. I remember what I saw through them and from them, and, what they would tell me. So I want that same thing. So I understand that. So, but I have a question, or a kind of a response. So when you said that your mom came to you and said, will you forgive me? I think at that point, she had to do that to complete the process of forgiveness, but keep going with it, because even though maybe she might not have had, a lot of the guilt or whatever when it came to it, she understood what forgiveness was. And I think that if I'm wrong, tell me, but I think maybe from that point forward, that helped you get to the point to where, like, forgiveness had to come from everywhere, every which way. Just like sin was surrounding you, and temptation, like, forgiveness had to come in and be that barrier too. And I think that was so wise of your mom, and I hope that you draw from that, because I want that. I want my kids to one day come to me and say, listen, you did this to me, and I want that forgiveness. I think forgiveness is such a thing that we overlook and say, oh, I'm sorry. But there's so many things that come along with it that people don't want to kind of dive into, because, it's hurtful, it's painful, it's shameful, it's guiltful, it's all these kinds of things. But forgiveness draws out a lot of the impurities in relationships and friendships, and allows you to kind of reconnect and connect with that person on such a level that you wouldn't have had prior to that. So I'm glad that you brought that out about her. And I'm really proud of you. I'm glad that Danielle and I are getting to know you, and I'm glad that you're a fact. I'm glad that you are such a great witness, you know, especially for my daughter, because, you know, she is 14, and, you know, you guys have had times together. And so I appreciate that about you. And now when I see you up there singing and ministering, it gives me such a new perspective when it comes to you. And like I said, such a deeper love and appreciation for you. So thank you for opening up. Thank you for sharing everything. I know that it was hard. I appreciate, you know, you not holding back emotion, because people, they need to see that, you know what, just because we go to church and we're Christian doesn't mean that we don't have bad things happen in our life, or we don't cause things, or that we don't go through things, because we know it rains on the just and it rains on the unjust. And,
Right.
you know, thanks to God's grace, His mercy, and His love and forgiveness, we're able to have this relationship, you know, with Him. And, you know, without people that have been mentors in our life, or parents, you know, we would not be able to be where we're at today. You wouldn't be able to live on your own had forgiveness not been the foundation of your adult life. Because if you didn't have that early on, start that at least early on, your entire adult life would have just been wrecked. You wouldn't be working about, you know, the hospital, and you wouldn't be able to do all these great things. So it's like, you know, built on a foundation of forgiveness comes so many other great things. And I see that from you. I hear it from you. And like I said, I appreciate so much you coming on here and sharing. Maybe your mom will come on and share one day. I don't know. But it seems like your family has such a great, rich history of God and the things that you guys have gone through together, that it's such an amazing testimony. So I honestly, truly appreciate you, and thank you so much for coming on here. And like I said, we're going to put this out on YouTube. So we have your permission?
Yes.
Okay. So do you want to say anything? Or?
I just want to say thanks too, because just like Eric was saying, you know, seeing you up there in worship, and you're just so exuberant.
Yeah.
You know, looking at you on Sundays, I'm just like, she's really getting into it, you know. Now I know why. Now I know that worship and praise is because of the love for God, that He brought you through all of this. You are able to give Him that praise. You're not ashamed or worried about what people think. You're just so thankful to God, and for you to show that in your music. You know, it really inspires me. You know, I'm just an introvert. I don't like expressing a lot, you know, but, you know, I hope one day I get to that point to where I'm just not afraid, you know, to just show my worship like that, because it is a beautiful thing, you know. And I think a lot of people look up to you in that way. And you know, lately you've been sharing your music on Facebook, and that's been so inspiring, you know. So really just thanks for loving God, being who you are, and sharing that with the world, you know, because it's really, really encouraging. And your testimony really encouraged me to be a better mom, to keep praying, you know. And because a lot of times as a mom, I do get discouraged thinking that my words are not enough, or if I see my kids acting out, I think, oh, I'm doing something wrong, or are they going to make it? You know, it's one of the biggest fears, I think, as a parent, is your child going to make it?
Yeah.
And so, you know, just seeing everything that you have gone through, the suicide, the depression, all of that, you know, I think depression is one of those things I feel like so many people can't get out of, you know. And so it just worries me. But seeing that, you know, your mom, she continued to be on her knees in prayer for you, and you coming out of it, it's really inspiring me, and it really encouraged me to want to do more.
Do you have anything else you want to say or add, or?
Well, thanks for asking.
Absolutely.
Because like I told you, that it was just a confirmation when being at NAYC, with the Lord speaking to me through Brother Justin about that's what I have to do, is share my testimony.
Yeah.
So by you asking, it gave me a door to be able to do it. So thanks for asking.
I know a lot of people we've talked to have said they have been feeling a nudge from God to share their testimony, but they're not quite sure yet, you know, because of, you know, fear what people might think. You know, do you have any words for them? Because it seems like the Lord started nudging you back during this, yeah.
He did, especially because, like Brother Eric said at the very beginning, where it was like we tried to do this and then something would come up, and I kept talking to the Lord. I'm like, okay, Lord, I'm getting a little bit more nervous about what I know to talk about and what you want me to talk about.
Yeah.
But I kept going back to it and thinking about it, and life is messy.
Yeah.
Walking with the Lord is not perfect, nor does he want it to be perfect. He loves the imperfections.
Yeah.
And something to me is every facet of my testimony is a part of me, and it's also a part of him.
Yeah.
Because everything that I go through, he has allowed. But it's also gotten me to a point where if I didn't go through it, I would never have, you know, understood the Lord that I do now. And being able to just share my testimony is just kind of like one of those things where it's like, if anybody else is going through the exact same thing, I feel like it's my responsibility
Right.
to be able to, you know, share how I came through it. Because if I didn't, you know, I'd feel horrible thinking, you know, if I didn't share my testimony with knowing someone could overcome what I overcame.
Yeah.
That's something that the Lord had kind of stressed on me a little bit was, you know, my testimony is not for myself. My testimony is for other people.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's a testimony of you know, what God has done through your life, and you know, it's something that's going to keep going on. So you know, God's going to add to this, and you know, whoever this reaches, the whole purpose of Survivors Talk is not to just have survivors talking, but to just put these things out here to encourage others to want to do it. So if anybody else that sees this video, you know, draws encouragement from you or from the videos that we put out, it's worth it. It's worth to put these things out because it connects us with you. It connects, you know, you with whoever else. Like, you know, we found out that our videos are being watched by church and non-church people. They're being watched by, you know, everybody, and we've gotten some great feedback. And it's not to say, look at us or look at me or look what I did or look what I overcame. It's look what God has helped me to get through. That was so hard, but I'm willing to share it because I can't hold back any longer what God's done for me. It's like, you know, if God did something great and loving and awesome, we'd be out there telling it. But as soon as it comes to something that like we've done or, you know, we're shameful of, it's like we want to hold it back in. But they're both just as great. They both have just as much power. So, you know, it was great having you on. And, you know, like I said, I believe that all the opposition we had just getting into this video and talking with you, that it's going to have a great impact. So, you know, just be prepared for the feedback. And I hope that this really opens up some communication, you know, between you and whoever else, coworkers, whoever it may be, because in the middle of this pandemic, there's not a lot to be joyful or encouraged about. So, you know, I know that this video, and I never thought we'd be starting it during a pandemic, but it makes sense to me now because everybody's at home. We need stuff like this. I've had people say, okay, listen, where's the next video? Or, like, I want to hear some more about people, you know, so it's really great. Thank you really for being on. And, you know, I look forward to what God's going to continue to do in your life. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, and if you guys like and subscribe to the channel, we would greatly appreciate the support. It's really just about reaching out to people and reaching out to this world. So thank you, Sister Brittany. We do appreciate it. And we'll be praying for you as well, because I know you're on the front lines of this thing. So you know, continued prayer for you, and I appreciate you. And thank you so much for being out there and doing these things. So, you know, it's crazy time right now. So, but thank you so much.
No problem. Glad to give back.
Thank you so much.
Bye.